ready to get it going? Everybody in the building say welcome to the faith.
Hey, it's Pete, and welcome back to Question Christ. This video is going to be about Jesus being a man of history. In some of my previous videos, people have questioned that Jesus even existed. And I can understand if people have a problem with trying to figure out if Jesus is God or not. But there really shouldn't be any doubt that Jesus existed. Even people who doubt his deity believe he existed. So this video is going to show some non-biblical historical writings that confirm that Jesus was a man of history. And I think in some passages even confirm more. So the first historical writing that I wanted to talk about was written by a man named Tacitus. He was a Roman historian who had a volume of work called the Annals that covered the history of Rome under 4 emperors. And he wrote a passage about Emperor Nero's decision to blame the Christians for the fire that had destroyed Rome in AD 64. And Tacitus wrote this: Nero fastened the guilt on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name has its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of Pontius Pilatus, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome. Tacitus is definitely not writing in support of Christianity here, but he corroborates what is written in the Gospels, and that Jesus was an historical person. It also incidentally speaks to the rampant growth of Christianity at the time in Rome. Probably my favorite historical passage that's non-biblical that proves that Jesus was a man of history, and I think proves a lot more, was written in the Jewish Talmud. The Talmud is a collection of Jewish rabbinical writings compiled between around AD 70 and AD 500. And the earliest period of this compilation was between AD 70 and AD 200. And there's a passage in there that talks about Jesus. And it goes like this. On the eve of the Passover, Yeshu was hanged. For 40 days before the execution took place, a herald cried, "He is going forth to be stoned because he has practiced sorcery and enticed Israel to apostasy." So who's Yeshu? Yeshu is how you pronounce Jesus in Hebrew. So it is about Jesus. The term hanged could be used to describe crucifixion. You find it in the Bible under Galatians 3 verse 13. It declared that Christ was hanged. And Luke 23 verse 39 applies this term to the criminals who were crucified with Jesus. This passage also confirms that Jesus was crucified on the eve of Passover, which is clearly stated in the Bible. The 40 days before his execution part can easily be explained by seeing how many times the Jewish leaders were trying to dispose of Jesus. As in Mark 12, verse 12, when Jesus is telling a parable that the Jewish leadership sees as enticing people to be against the Jewish leadership, they want to arrest him right on the spot. And there's many instances where Jesus is definitely being tried to be tripped up in some kind of heretical speech by the Jewish leadership. They ask him questions because they want him to go over the line so they can charge him with something. The whole 40 days and the herald thing, I'm not going to try to wrap that up in a nice, neat box. I don't really know what that's about. But it goes with what they were trying to do to Jesus at the time, so that's fine. But probably the most incriminating part of this passage is why Jesus was going to be killed in the first place. Again, I quote, "He is going forth to be stoned because he has practiced sorcery and enticed Israel to apostasy." Now, the whole sorcery part, he practiced sorcery. There obviously was something supernatural going on around Jesus at the time that the Jewish leadership is acknowledging. And I would say one person's miracle is another person's sorcery, so that's where I come from with that. And enticed Israel to apostasy. Apostasy, if people don't know, apostasy is when you abandon a religion or a religious belief. So if he's enticing Israel to apostasy, I would venture to say that that's showing that Jesus is saying he's God, and that the people that he's talking to realize he's saying he's God, and that they're turning away from the Jewish faith at that point to follow Jesus. So I not only does that prove that he's an historical figure, and but I also, from people who aren't gracious to Jesus, almost proving from a historical source that Jesus was doing something that was a little supernatural, and that he was claiming he was God. So I think that's a very important piece of historical writing. A little bit farther down is Lucian of Samosata. He was a 2nd century Greek satirist, and in one of his works he wrote of the early Christians as follows: "The Christians worship a man to this day, the distinguished personage who introduced their novel rites, and was crucified on that account. It was impressed on them by their original lawgiver that they are all brothers from the moment that they are converted, and deny the gods of Greece, and worship the crucified sage, and live after his laws." Now, this is 2nd century, this is a little bit farther down the line, but it does show that even at that point, that people were following Jesus, who they believed as crucified, and that they were denying the gods of Greece, that they were so adamant about it. They were denying the gods of Greece, which would get you in trouble at the time, and that the whole religion was founded on Jesus. So that's another little bit of historical writing that I believe shows that Jesus is an historical figure. There are other Christian there's other non-Christian references. There's this guy named Josephus. He was a 1st century Jewish historian, but he's held in a lot of debate over if things were added to his work or not. So that's why I'm not even going to bring it up. But there are some writings. One of the things he said was explaining how James, the brother of the so-called Christ, was executed. And so that's a little less debatable. Then there's a whole passage, I won't even go into it because I know everyone will comment and try to tear it apart. But if anybody is interested, look under Josephus and look under his works. There's others, but that should get us started. And I do believe that those non-biblical writings at least show that Jesus was a historical figure. I wouldn't discount the Bible, but we'll leave that out because I know for people who don't believe, that's like, forget it, off the charts, that we're not going to touch that. But I am going to do a series of videos that show that the Bible is indeed trustworthy. But for those who don't trust the Bible, here are some historical references to get you going. I'd love to hear your comments. Again, please keep everything civil, including the comments you guys are writing to each other. Okay, no need to call people names. And let's keep the discussion going. Thanks.